There's a hidden chapter of human history deliberately erased, where black gods walked the earth long before the name Yahweh was ever spoken. Their presence was so powerful, their influence so vast, that even the whispers of their existence would one day be shrouded in silence. Imagine civilizations thriving with advanced knowledge, building monuments that even today defy explanation. Imagine rulers so revered they were seen as divine, their connection to the spiritual world so strong it shaped entire cultures. These gods, these black gods, were not myths. They were living beings who carried wisdom and power beyond what we have been taught, and their stories have been carefully buried beneath centuries of rewritten history. We walk among the ruins of the greatness every day, though most never recognize it. Ancient temples hidden deep within jungles, towering stone obelisks left in desolate deserts, artifacts sealed away in museum basements and labeled, unknown origin. Each of these relics carries a story. Stories of a time when Africa and its surrounding lands were the cradle of profound spiritual civilizations, long before Yahweh became a name etched in the minds of millions. But why has this knowledge been buried? Why has the world been convinced that these gods were nothing more than superstition? And most importantly, who decided what parts of history we were allowed to remember? Look closely at the fragments that remain, statues with unmistakable African features, sacred texts describing beings of immense power descending from the heavens, myths from cultures oceans apart, all pointing to the same ancestral truth. These aren't coincidences. They are pieces of a vast puzzle, one that stretches back millennia to a time when the divine walked among men. Entire religions have been shaped by the deliberate erasure of these black gods, their temples toppled, their names turned into shadows. Yet, their legacy still breathes beneath the surface, waiting for those who dare to see. Before we begin, I need you to do one thing. Subscribe to this channel and like this video so we can reach more people with these powerful revelations. And as we uncover these long-forgotten truths, share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your perspective, your questions, your insights, because together we will bring to light a story that has been hidden for far too long. The era before Yahweh, what history refuses to tell. The era we are about to step into is one that history often avoids, a time long before the name of Yahweh was ever whispered among men. It was an age when civilizations in Africa and the Near East stood in majestic glory, their temples piercing the skies, their cultures deeply woven with mysteries that shaped the very essence of humanity. These societies, long before the emergence of Israel, were not primitive as some narratives have led us to believe. They were advanced, structured, and spiritually profound, establishing powerful systems of belief that reached into the unseen realms. Picture the ancient Nile Valley, where colossal monuments rose from the sands like eternal guardians. The people believed the gods themselves walked among them, granting wisdom to kings and priests who understood the delicate balance of life and the afterlife. In the great temples of Kemet, what we now call Egypt, prayers were whispered into chambers carved with such precision that even today, modern engineering struggles to replicate them. These temples were not merely places of worship, they were cosmic portals, carefully aligned with the stars, serving as bridges between heaven and earth. Every stone carried meaning. Every wall told the story of deities whose power commanded the respect of nations. Farther south and west, in the ancient kingdoms of Nubia and Kush, black kings and queens ruled empires that rivaled their northern neighbors. The gods were not abstract ideas but living forces that shaped every aspect of existence. Their spiritual systems carried a depth that transcended ritual. It was about maintaining harmony with the natural order. Priests and priestesses, robed in brilliant colors, stood as mediators between humanity and the divine, calling upon entities that predated the pantheons familiar to modern religions. These gods bore names and faces that have been obscured by time, yet their presence was etched into every inscription, every sacred artifact left behind. Travel eastward and you would encounter the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, peoples whose spiritual traditions were older than the foundations of Jerusalem itself. Towering ziggurats stretched upward like stairways for the gods to descend, their summits believed to touch the heavens. In these cultures, divine beings were woven into the very fabric of governance, agriculture, and law. Kings were considered chosen by the gods, and to dishonor a deity meant the collapse of the natural and social order. The names Enlil, Enki, Inanna, and Anu reverberated through their temples, powerful entities who were thought to shape the destinies of men and nations. The evidence of these spiritual systems is undeniable. Inscriptions etched into ancient stone tablets, artifacts hidden in the sands of forgotten empires, and oral traditions that survived conquests all testify to a rich heritage of divine worship that predates the rise of Yahweh. These civilizations left behind legacies so vast and so complex that to dismiss them as mere mythology would be to ignore the very roots of human belief. The gods were feared and adored, their rituals complex and deeply symbolic, often involving offerings of food, incense, and even blood to secure the favor of beings they believed held control over the forces of nature. As you envision these sacred sites, imagine the resonant chants of priests echoing through temple halls illuminated by flickering torches. Picture the hieroglyphs on the walls, alive with scenes of deities bestowing life and wisdom upon rulers. See the starry night skies over Africa and Mesopotamia, where these civilizations observed the heavens with meticulous care, believing the movements of celestial bodies carried divine messages. These were not random acts of superstition, they were the hallmarks of societies deeply attuned to the spiritual dimensions of life, guided by gods whose origins stretch back into the shadows of antiquity. What history often refuses to tell is that before Yahweh, there were black gods and divine beings venerated for millennia. Their names may have been buried, their temples reduced to ruins, and their stories rewritten by later traditions, but their presence shaped the very soil from which later religions would emerge. These ancient spiritual systems were not merely precursors to something greater, they were complete in their own right, rooted in wisdom, power, and an understanding of the universe that still defies modern comprehension. This is the truth that the sands of time have tried to conceal, a truth etched in stone and whispered across generations, waiting for those who dare to see beyond the surface. The Black Gods, Identities and Legacies. The world was once filled with whispers of gods whose names commanded both fear and reverence. Long before Yahweh was known, civilizations across Africa and Mesopotamia worshipped deities whose presence shaped their cultures, laws, and understanding of the universe. These were the Black Gods, figures of immense power and mystery, whose stories have survived only through fragments etched into stone, passed down through oral traditions, and buried deep beneath layers of rewritten history. Osiris, known as the god of the afterlife in ancient Egypt, was far more than a symbol of death. He was revered as the eternal king, a figure who had triumphed over chaos and returned to rule from the unseen world. To his followers, Osiris was not a distant myth, he was a presence guiding them through life and into eternity. He represented regeneration, the promise that death was not an end but a transformation. The green hue often used to depict him was no mere artistic flourish, it spoke of fertility, rebirth, and the cycles of nature that his power was believed to govern. Entire kingdoms built their burial practices around his story, crafting tombs not simply as graves, but as gateways into his realm. Ra, the sun god, was the supreme life-giver. Each day as the sun rose, people believed they witnessed the visible embodiment of Ra's strength. He was the god who sailed across the heavens in his solar bark, battling forces of darkness to ensure that light would once again return. Temples were aligned with the sun's movements to honor him, and kings claimed descent from Ra himself, believing their right to rule was sealed by his divine bloodline. To call Ra a mere myth would be to deny the way his worship was embedded into the very heartbeat of Egyptian society. Every sunrise was seen as proof of his triumph, a reminder that without him, life itself would cease. Isis, the mother goddess, stood as a symbol of unmatched devotion and power. Her story of resurrecting Osiris after his violent death and protecting their son Horus captured the essence of divine feminine strength. She was both a nurturer and a force to be feared. Her magic was said to surpass that of all other gods, and her influence extended beyond Egypt's borders, spreading into cultures that would later birth entirely new religious systems. For countless women, Isis was the embodiment of protection, motherhood, and hidden knowledge, the kind of knowledge that could preserve life itself. From Africa, our journey moves eastward into the heart of Mesopotamia, where gods such as Enki and Anu reigned in ancient Sumer. Enki, the god of wisdom and water, was known as the one who gifted humanity with skills and knowledge. He was portrayed as a creator who molded life from clay, an image that would later echo in religious texts many of us know today. Anu, the sky god, stood above the pantheon as the highest authority, a figure who could grant kingship and shape the destiny of nations. These deities were not seen as distant ideals, they were considered active participants in human affairs, their blessings and wrath believed to dictate the fortunes of entire empires. The legacies of these gods ripple through time, influencing the formation of later belief systems. Themes of resurrection, divine kingship, judgment after death, and even the notion of a supreme sky deity can be traced back to the worship of these figures. Their stories were not confined to the regions in which they were born. Through conquest, migration, and cultural exchange, the black gods' identities and myths spread, subtly transforming as they merged with the traditions of new peoples. Many of the religious ideas that dominate the world today can be linked, directly or indirectly, to the seeds planted by the worshippers of Osiris, Ra, Isis, Enki, Anu, and their contemporaries. As you listen to these names and their legacies, consider the depth of their impact. These gods were not abstract symbols, they were the foundation of civilizations, the axis around which entire cultures turned. But a question remains, one that has haunted scholars and seekers for centuries. Were these gods simply myths designed to explain the unknown? Or were they real beings, ancient powers whose existence has been deliberately hidden or forgotten over time? Lost technologies, ancient wisdom. Beneath the sands of time lie fragments of knowledge so profound that even the most brilliant minds of today cannot fully comprehend their origins. Across ancient temples, pyramids, and monolithic structures carved with impossible precision, we uncover evidence of technologies and sciences that rival, and in some cases surpass, what we possess in our modern era. These civilizations mastered astronomy to a degree that defies logic. They mapped the heavens with pinpoint accuracy, charting the movements of planets and stars without telescopes, satellites, or computers. Their calendars stretched thousands of years into the future, aligning with celestial events that we only recently began to rediscover. How could they know so much, with so little? Their architectural achievements tell an equally stunning story. Gigantic stones, some weighing hundreds of tons, were transported and set into place with such exact alignment that even a sheet of paper cannot fit between the joints. Entire cities were built in harmony with constellations above, their designs reflecting cosmic patterns believed to channel divine power. Modern engineers struggle to replicate these feats, and yet these ancient builders executed them flawlessly, long before steel cranes, modern blueprints, or industrial tools existed. Who taught them such mastery? Even their understanding of the human body was remarkably advanced. Inscriptions and artifacts reveal knowledge of surgical techniques, herbal medicine, and energy systems within the body that mirror concepts only recently explored by contemporary science. They spoke of life forces and spiritual energies, tools of healing that have been dismissed by many today, yet their effectiveness was revered and feared by those who witnessed them firsthand. This wisdom was not merely practical, it was sacred, attributed to the gods themselves, beings who were believed to walk among mortals, sharing secrets that could elevate humanity to unimaginable heights. But not all of these secrets were meant to be shared. There are whispers, even now, of inventions hidden away, devices capable of harnessing energies beyond the scope of our technology. Spiritual practices that could open doors to realms unseen, granting knowledge and power that rulers and religious orders sought desperately to control. The few who stumbled upon these truths were often silenced, their discoveries buried in the shadows of history. What else has been lost to deliberate suppression? What other fragments of divine knowledge lie hidden, waiting to be uncovered? This ancient wisdom was more than superstition. It was a system of understanding that connected the physical and the spiritual, the earth and the cosmos. And as you consider the sheer magnitude of what these civilizations achieved, you must ask yourself, was it truly the work of human hands alone, or evidence of a relationship with gods who reigned long before Yahweh? The battle of spiritual power, the rise of Yahweh. The atmosphere across the ancient world was shifting. Centuries of spiritual traditions, rooted in the worship of deities believed to control nature, fertility, war, and the cycles of life, were beginning to face a formidable challenger. Yahweh's name was spreading through whispers, proclamations, and prophetic voices, carrying with it a different kind of authority, one that did not seek to coexist with other gods but to overthrow them completely. This was not a gentle merging of beliefs, it was a battle for spiritual supremacy. Ancient communities who had long bowed before their ancestral gods now heard declarations that these powers were false, that they held no ultimate dominion, and that Yahweh alone was the source of all creation and power. The confrontation was clear in the sacred texts that began to circulate. Yahweh did not dismiss the presence of other deities as mere illusions. Instead, he spoke directly against them, acknowledging their presence in the lives of the people, yet declaring their impotence. Exodus chapter 20 verse 3 thundered with uncompromising clarity, "You shall have no other gods before me." The wording alone raises profound questions. Why speak of other gods if they did not, in some form, exist? Why such a firm command if there was no rival presence drawing the hearts and allegiances of the people? Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 17 sheds further light, describing how sacrifices were offered to demons, not God, to gods they had not known. The text suggests not only the reality of other spiritual entities but a cosmic conflict between Yahweh and these rival powers. The clash was not only theological but deeply personal for the nations involved. Entire cultures had built their identities around the worship of deities like Baal, Asherah, Molech, and others who promised prosperity, rain, and victory in battle. The prophets of Yahweh, however, denounced these practices, often in ways that led to violent confrontations. Elijah's showdown with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel was one such moment that displayed the raw force of this spiritual battle. Before the gathered crowd, the prophets of Baal cried out from morning until evening, slashing themselves in desperation, but no fire fell from their altar. Then Elijah called upon Yahweh, and fire descended from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench. The crowd fell silent, then erupted with the words, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." That single event encapsulated the shift taking place across generations, a dramatic dismantling of old religious orders in the face of Yahweh's undeniable power. But even after such demonstrations, the older spiritual systems did not disappear overnight. They clung to life in secret places, preserved in the memories and practices of those unwilling to abandon the gods of their ancestors. Yahweh's demand for exclusive devotion was not merely about ritual but about reclaiming the hearts and minds of entire nations. The tension of this spiritual conflict echoed through every commandment and every prophetic warning. In Isaiah chapter 42 verse 8, Yahweh declared, "I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols." The language is unmistakable. There was no room for divided loyalties. This raises a haunting question that has echoed for millennia. If these other gods were simply empty statues and myths, why would Yahweh speak of them with such seriousness? Why would he warn his people with such urgency about their influence? Was it possible that these ancient deities were not mere fabrications, but entities of real spiritual power that sought to rival the Creator himself? This question lingers like a shadow over the ancient world, a reminder that the rise of Yahweh was not just the birth of a religion, but the beginning of a cosmic war that would shape the destiny of humanity. The deliberate erasure of African spiritual history was not a random accident of time, it was a calculated act, carried out with precision and intent. Entire civilizations, once vibrant with a spiritual framework that connected the seen and unseen, were systematically stripped of their narratives. Libraries holding centuries of knowledge were burned to the ground, scrolls reduced to ash, and the written testimonies of ancient wisdom deliberately rewritten to fit a new narrative. What could not be rewritten was branded as dangerous or demonic, demonizing entire traditions and severing generations from the very roots that once grounded them. This was not just the destruction of history, it was the destruction of identity. The gods and spiritual systems that had once guided entire nations were painted as primitive, even evil, while foreign deities were elevated as the singular path to truth. Songs, rituals, and oral traditions that had carried sacred knowledge for millennia were silenced through fear and oppression. Those who dared to preserve the old ways faced persecution, their voices stamped out by powers that sought to control not only land and resources but the hearts and minds of entire populations. And yet, history is resilient. Fragments of that ancient wisdom still whisper through time, carried in the stories told by elders, in the symbols carved into stone, and in the rhythms of sacred drums that never stopped beating. They whisper in the languages we still speak, the names we still carry, and in the unshakable sense that there was once a deeper spiritual connection, one that predates the systems that were forced upon our ancestors. It is in these whispers that we find a bittersweet truth. Though they tried to bury it, the spiritual legacy of Africa could not be fully erased. Somewhere within each of us lies a spark of that forgotten knowledge, waiting to be remembered. The bloodlines, the hidden elites. The knowledge of the black gods was never entirely lost, it was guarded, buried deep within the veins of bloodlines that understood its power. These families, scattered across continents and hidden behind layers of secrecy, became living vaults of ancient wisdom. They knew that the stories, rituals, and spiritual technologies of the first gods could shift the balance of the world, and they chose to guard it, not for the liberation of humanity, but for their own survival and dominance. Behind every throne, every dynasty, every empire that seemed untouchable, there existed an unbroken chain of those who carried the hidden truths. They were masters at disguising themselves as ordinary leaders, scholars, or benefactors of society, but behind closed doors, they moved as a single network, bonded by a covenant made long before recorded history. They understood what the world did not, that knowledge was power, and the true history of the black gods could not be allowed to surface. It would empower too many. It would dissolve the structures they had spent millennia perfecting. So they built barriers, cultural, political, even spiritual, to ensure the masses would remain in the dark. They altered narratives, rewrote histories, and disguised the very identities of the ancient ones, all while maintaining the illusion of progress and enlightenment. Even as civilizations rose and fell, these elites adapted, infiltrating every institution capable of shaping human thought: religious orders, monarchies, secret societies, banks, universities, and governments. Their reach was silent but total. And yet, their actions were never only about control. They revered the knowledge they held, studying it, practicing it, refining the ancient rites that connected them to forces most people would dismiss as myth. Through this, they became gatekeepers, deciding who would taste fragments of truth and who would remain blind. This is why the world you know today looks the way it does. Every decision, every war, every sudden rise or fall of a nation has been touched in some way by those who inherited the covenant. They sit in the shadows, powerful enough to never need a spotlight, pulling strings while you live under illusions carefully crafted for you. And perhaps the greatest cruelty of all is that you were never meant to live in the dark. The knowledge they hoard is the very thing that could awaken you to your divine heritage, the same truths the black gods lived and died to preserve. But instead, you've been deliberately cut off from it, trapped in systems designed to drain your energy and distract you from asking dangerous questions. You were born into a world that has already decided what you should know, what you should believe, and who you should serve. And the reason is as simple as it is devastating: the less you know about who you truly are, the more power they have to decide your future. You've been kept in the dark so others could stay in power. And they will go to unimaginable lengths to make sure you never find the light. From the very beginning of this journey, we have unearthed truths buried deep beneath the sands of time, truths that challenge everything we thought we knew. We began with the forgotten gods, those shadowed figures revered long before the name of Yahweh was ever whispered among mankind. We traced their presence across continents and civilizations, hidden in myths, etched into stone, preserved in symbols most of the world has dismissed as mere superstition. We saw how the worship of these ancient beings shaped entire cultures, how their influence reached far beyond the limits of their time, and how carefully their memory has been erased from the pages of history. We examined the secrecy, the deliberate concealment, the manipulation of knowledge that has kept millions from ever knowing the depth of these mysteries. But now you know. You have heard the truth and seen how far back the deception goes. This knowledge is not given by chance. It is a calling, a call to awaken from spiritual slumber, to question what you have been taught, to seek beyond the surface and reconnect with the true source of power and identity. You cannot know what you now know. And with that awareness comes responsibility. There is a spiritual war raging all around us, one that has been fought for millennia. And those who understand the hidden truths must stand strong, because the forces that kept this secret will do everything to keep you bound in fear and ignorance. If this message stirred something in your spirit, if it opened your eyes to the reality that has been concealed, do not let it end here. Subscribe now, and like this video so it can reach others who need to hear this truth. Share it with your friends, your family, those you love, because every soul awakened is a victory against the forces of darkness that have enslaved generations. Together, we can shine light into the shadows, and reveal what was never meant to stay hidden. Now, let us pray. Heavenly Father, eternal source of all creation, we come before you with humble hearts and awakened spirits. We ask for clarity and wisdom as we navigate the world around us, a world filled with deception and distraction. We ask that you strip away the layers of lies and restore to us the true knowledge of who we are in you. Let our identity be anchored in your truth and not in the illusions that seek to enslave our minds. Father, I ask that you release protection over every person hearing this prayer right now. Surround them with your light as a shield. No weapon formed against them shall prosper. Every plan of the enemy designed to drag them back into darkness is dismantled in your mighty name. I declare that the chains of confusion and fear are broken. I declare restoration over their families, over their finances, over their purpose. I declare that the veil over their eyes is permanently lifted, and that they walk forward in boldness, knowing they are chosen for such a time as this. Lord, pour your Spirit into them. Awaken dormant gifts. Activate the power within them to discern truth from lies, to see beyond the distractions of this world, and to stand firm even when the storm rages. Let them be carriers of light in their communities. Let them be a voice that speaks hope and truth in a time when so many are lost. We thank you for revealing what was hidden. We thank you for guiding us back to the true foundation. And we ask that from this day forward, every step we take brings us closer to your purpose. In the name above every name, we seal this prayer, and we declare that every person under the sound of this voice will walk in divine identity, protection, and restoration. Amen.